Hello world, I'm Dawn, and in today's video we're going to go from drab to fab. I think there's probably something in this processing for just about everyone who uses DxO Photolab. So this image is from about 2 weeks ago. We've been having quite a bit of rain in our area, and this river, which runs through the campus at the university that I work at, normally quite slow and calm, it came up quite a bit, as you can see, and so I wanted to be able to capture that power. It was raining, I was huddled underneath an umbrella trying to keep everything dry, and the resulting image is a bit low in contrast, and I don't entirely love the colors, and hence that's why I've decided to go black and white with this one. This is a little bit of a longer video today, but if you enjoy watching other people process images, watching the thought process, I think you'll enjoy this one. Right, so here is the image and here is the plan. So this is the reset image, and we're going to be working on it to take the color version of it to roughly like that. On transit to taking the black and white version to it roughly like that. And here's a little rundown of what I'm going to be looking at, so just plunk my notes in there. So one of the things, if I come back to the color image, right now the main thing, pardon me, my little document's gone away when I've done that. The main thing that is standing out, of course, is the sky because it's the lightest thing. So I want to even up that exposure, bring more attention into the frame, especially to the river, which is quite a central piece of this for me. So looking at this, some of the things I'll be doing, I'm going to be reducing the exposure by about 0.8 of a stop. And the reason for that is I attempted to do some local adjustments on the sky to bring the sky down with local adjustments. But if you look at the fine detail of these branches and how they're going off into the fog, the selection was really struggling with making that look like I hoped for it to look. So I found it to be a better solution overall to bring the overall exposure down and then lift up the bits that I wanted to lift up. So we'd be doing that. I'm going to use a little bit of smart lighting, going to do some selective tone, raise my mids, raise my shadows a bit. That's going to be compensating for that minus 0.8. Going to put on a bit of clear view. I will add more clear view later on, particularly to a couple of sections, but to start with just a global clear view of 20. Going to add some contrast. Of course, if you've watched any of my videos, you'll see me all the time removing the micro contrast. I will add a little bit of fine contrast to it though. Going to increase the saturation. I'm doing that because I feel like it impacts the way that it converts it to black and white. So I want to punch those colors a little bit more in order to impact that when it comes to black and white conversion. Going to remove some dust spots. When I start to impact the contrast of this image, you'll quickly start to see that my sensor has gone dirty again. Needs a wee swipe. Going to straighten the perspective a little bit with this clock tower here. This very easily shows up things aren't quite right in terms of perspective, so I'll take care of that. And a little bit of crop. I'm going to bring it in on the side a little bit here, as you'll see. Excellent. So then we're going to go to local adjustments, going to brush on some clear view on the river and the building, going to add a little bit of a gradient in the grass down here. That's just to almost like you would use a vignette. If I don't do that, that grass is a little lighter than I had hoped, and it draws a bit more attention than I had hoped. So a little bit of a gradient there just to bring that down. And then once I'm in Silver Efex, some of the things I'll be doing, I'm going to use a preset to start with, and then I'm going to amplify my whites, amplify my blacks, add a little bit of fine structure, film grain, and a small rectangular vignette, which will just, again, help to constrain the eye. So that is the plan. Now let's jump into the edit. So I'll start things off with an exposure compensation. As I had said, I'm going to do a minus 0.8 there, which is going to bring down the sky quite considerably. I'm also going to put on some smart lighting. And I think, in fact, that I'm going to use spot weighted on this. And I'll pop a spot on here. This is not what I did with my original edit, but I think that it does better things for the sky and the foreground if I put it on spot. So we'll go ahead with that. So now the next thing on my to-do list is selective tone, and I'm going to add some mids, a fair bit in the vicinity of about 45, and I'm going to lift my shadows. Maybe about, I had 35 down originally, but given that I've done this smart lighting slightly differently than I did last time, so I'm going to, that's already lifted my shadows a little, so I'm going to maybe not go quite as high. In fact, I'm going to bring that down maybe even to 25 now seeing that. Now the next thing I want to hit on is my clear view, so I'll pop that on. And I'm going to bring that down globally to about 20. As I mentioned, I will come back to a little bit of clear view locally when I get to the local adjustments, but for now we'll go with that. And I'm also going to add some contrast. So let me put that on. Let me remove the micro contrast. Then I'm going to add about 10, 12 will be fine, of just the standard contrast slider, and I'm going to add, say maybe around 20 on the fine contrast slider. So that's everything for this tab. I'm going to go across to the color tab, and in here I'll leave pretty much everything else the same, but I'll put on the saturation, as I mentioned, about 20, and again this is just to help out when it comes to converting to black and white time. Now before I forget, I should pop back here, and I'm going to actually briefly put up my clear view all the way so I can see my dust spots a little bit better, and I will take care of my dust spots next. Great, that'll do. Excellent. So now before I forget, we'll get this back down to 20, because that is one of my party tricks. I make an adjustment like that and then I leave it on because I get used to it, and then I move along. So now it's off. All right, so next let's go across to the geometry area, and I'm going to tick on my perspective. It's going to auto have a go. I'll just move out so that we can see things. It's actually quite reasonable, isn't it? I'm going to do this manually. The way I usually do this is to move them roughly in shape, or in position, and then I will bring it into 1-to-1 and more fine-tunedly place them. Just using this line particularly. I'll start it a little before and after, but essentially there and there, about there, and about there. Maybe just in a touch with this one. And I'll go back out again so that you can see what happens. So I'll click apply. Yeah, so it did actually do a fairly different job than the auto did. So let's have a peek. I'm going to pop my crop on, which will auto crop. Sometimes it just takes a moment for my eyes to adjust a little bit to that. Yeah, I think that's good. So I will leave it there. Now I do want to do a little bit more cropping in that I'm going to bring this side in a little. Great trick. I forget who commented this one, but if I hold because I often go to the unconstrained place when I'm going to do cropping, and if I hold Control and drag, that I don't need to change any settings, it will just go unconstrained for me. So that's a great tip. Thank you to whoever gave me that tip. Now, I'm just looking actually. That perspective has not gone. Look over here. This is not quite right. Let me go ahead and close this. That doesn't feel quite right, does it? So, let me have another crack at this and see what I see. Yeah, I think that's better. It's pretty straight along there. I think I'm happy enough with that. I probably, if I weren't recording things, might spend a little bit more time on it, but I don't want you guys to sit here bored while I fiddle with a few pixels here and there. So let's call that close enough for now. So the next thing to hit on is the local adjustments. Come up to my local adjustments tab, and I'm going to use a brush. I can just get rid of this, I think. Going to use a brush. I don't think I probably needed to click plus then. It's just a habitual action. Click on my brush. Going to hold Control and use my scroll wheel to change my size. And I'm going to just brush on the river. Bring it down in size a little bit. Brush on the river. That should be fine. And then I'm also going to, actually I'll do it separately. I'll keep them separate just to be on the safe side. So I'm going to increase my clear view on that. If I get a hold of it, there it goes. Just a bit. Originally, when I first processed this image, I didn't use more clear view on here, and I kept the water smoother. But then I in amongst things, at some point, I accidentally left some global clear view on, and as I was looking at it, I thought, oh, maybe I quite like the sort of streaky, almost painterliness that comes from it. So I'm not 100% sure what my final thought is on that, but for now, we'll go with the clear view. And I'm going to increase my highlights quite a bit, just try to pull out some of the whiter parts of that water. And maybe to compensate so it doesn't go too bright, I'll just bring some of the midtones down a little bit there. So that's probably pretty good for now. And I'm also going to just click a plus, get a new mask, make this a little bigger with, again, holding Control down and using my scroll wheel. And I'm going to come across this stuff here. What I'm keen on, make this smaller, is, right now, let me focus for a moment, is really to bring out some of the contrast, the white stone on the darker stone. So I'll add a little bit of clear view to that. Is anything happening? There we go. There comes some clear view. And again, I'm going to also work on the highlights there a little bit, just to bring those up, add a little bit more contrast between the white stone and the darker stone. That's probably pretty good. Now, a final thing before I move on is I did want to add a gradient to that grass. And I'll just add a standard gradient here. Probably go something like that. And then drag it back. Readjust. Let's try that. And I'll just bring the exposure down in general on that. Maybe about there. So there's the difference in the local. So it's just added a bit of contrast in the river, added a little contrast on the building, and then pulled that grass down so that it grabs just a little bit less attention. Now I am curious, actually I'll come out of local adjustments, but before I go too far, I want to just see how I like how the stone is looking. I think that's a really nice, crisp contrast. I want to see how this water is. I'm just looking at my histogram, and I'm just above, red channel there is 205 to 210. Even I just saw it hit somewhere near 220. So it's reasonably bright. Yeah, I don't want it to be too bright. So, I don't want it to, this image in general isn't too bright. This is the painterliness I was talking about that I found that the clear view gave it. It's just a little bit more structure in there, which looked a bit more like brush strokes to me, which I thought was quite cool. Excellent. So let me zoom back out and let's go to the Nik collection, Silver Efex, and do a little bit of work in there. I'm just going to check my export settings. Yes, it's a good thing I did as well. Export selected files without processing. That's the setting, the selection that I use if I'm sending something that I've already worked on in Silver Efex, for example, back to Silver Efex, and I want it to be able to pick up those adjustments again. In this case, I'm starting fresh and I want it to have all of these adjustments I've just done, so I need to do export as a TIFF. I generally go 16-bit TIFF, and I will click OK. Up here to Silver Efex Pro 3. Wait a moment. New version of Nik collection is available. Oh, I did download that. I thought I had installed it. Apparently not. We'll do it later for now. That'll be fine. Right then. So I'm just going to scroll up to the top here. And like I said, to start things off, I will use one of the presets. And I particularly like this one here, Fine Art Process, just as a standard basic starting point. So I'll do that. So with that conversion, I'm just going to have a peek here. So just going over the different zones, nothing showing up in zone 10, which I'm very pleased with because there is nothing in zone 10 in this image. Nothing showing up in zone 9 either. And then we see part of that sky coming in zone 8. And much of the rest of the sky coming in zone 7. Parts of the river in 6. Parts of the building as well, kind of spread out. Lots more of the river in zone 5. So there's a pretty nice spread there. Zone 4, we see a lot of that grass and whatnot. Zone 3, little bits and pieces peppered throughout. So there's pretty good coverage there. So I'm quite happy with that. Now, one of the things I wanted to do was down here in contrast adjustment, there's the ability to amplify whites and amplify blacks. And so I'll just give it a little bit on each of those. I'm going to give it maybe about 10% on amplify whites and maybe about 5% or so on amplify blacks. I just feel that given that it is a black and white image, that it adds a certain strength to the image. Now I'm just going to scroll down a little bit. There's a setting here that says fine structure, and I want to actually just bring that down a touch. So you can see that the fine art process preset has set it on 45%. And I'm just going to actually bring that down to 35%, just to take a little bit of the structure out of that. Now, if I scroll down just a little bit more, coming here, I'll start with control point. I want to add in a control point that I'm going to add up to this portion of the sky. And now you can see, so I've added the control point. So this whole selective adjustments area now has a whole bunch of controls in it. So I've added a control point, and these are the controls that I can use on that control point. I quite simply want to just pull down the brightness a little bit on that in the corner. Maybe a little bit less on that, and then maybe a little bit on highlight reduction. And I'm just going to expand that a little bit, maybe move where the selection, where the point is. Cool. I just want to, again, creating a little bit of a barrier there, so the eye goes to the tower because there's quite a bit of brightness just behind the tower, but I don't want the eye jutting off out of that corner, so maybe gone a little far there. I always find it a really delicate balance. Cool, we'll call that good for now. Just going to scroll down a little bit. Want to add some film grain in here. And I'm just going to scroll down and get a Neopan Acros 100, just a fine grain. And then let me just have a quick peek. Where am I? Oh, vignetting, there we go. Let's just add a little something in there. Just trying those out. Yeah, we'll just go with lens fall off 1. Just want a little, going to make it more rectangular. Going to bring it down so that I can get a sense of how much it's impacting. Going to open it up a bit. I don't need it to be that big. So I'm pretty happy with that shape, I believe, quite rectangular. And again, this is just to darken down the edges a little. I'm not going much with it. It is my strong desire that nobody look at this and think there's a vignette on there. Let me just put that off and on. Maybe I'm just going to try to tweak that back to 10-ish. There we go. Great, so I think that's everything that I wanted to do in Silver Efex. So I will leave this here. Non-destructive edits is still ticked, and I will go ahead and click apply. Awesome. Now looking across the bottom here, I can see this one has got the nick and the underscore and 3, which comes from the fact that this one is variant number 3, virtual copy number 3. So I'll click on this. This will be the result that we've just come up with. And there it is. And just for comparison's sake, let me quickly click on the last one I did when I was sort of testing things out and sort of came to this as my processing recipe. So this is darkened down better in this corner, which it was based on the fact that when I did this one, I felt like it was too light, so I hadn't darkened it as much as I had wanted, so I prefer that. And I noticed this one's a little bit lighter up in this corner too, so I've gone a little bit more aggressive with this one here. I'm not sure which I prefer. Feel free to put in the comments if you have a preference. But I think that's really everything for this edit. So what did you think? I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Thanks so much for watching today. I hope that you got something useful or at least some entertainment value out of the video. And I hope that you come back to watch again. Bye for now.